Clementine Nkweta-Salami, Deputy Special Representative of the United Nations Secretary General in the United Nations Integrated Transition Assistance Mission in Sudan, UNITAMS, and resident humanitarian coordinator for Sudan. Welcome to Al-Arabiya.
Thank you very much for inviting me to your show.
It's a pleasure, and we thank you for your first sit-down interview with a television station. We are honored with that. I would like to start by asking you about the humanitarian situation, because that's in the heart of your mandate. Can you talk to us, please, and the millions of our viewers, about how bad the humanitarian situation is today in Sudan?
No, thank you very much. Indeed, the current conflict in Sudan is having a devastating consequence on civilians, with hundreds killed and thousands injured. Since April the 15th, about 2.7 million people have fled their homes in search of safety, both inside and outside of the country. Now, this includes more than about 2.1 million internally displaced and more than about 560,000 who have actually crossed a border. They've either fled as refugees or they were refugees in Sudan and are now returning to their countries of origin. And they've crossed the borders into Egypt, into Chad, and into South Sudan. Those are the countries that have really received the vast majority. We have some also crossing into Ethiopia. Now, just to give you a picture, that prior to the conflict in Sudan itself, there were about 3.8 million people who were internally displaced. And in the country, there were about 1.1 million refugees hosted by the government of Sudan. And many of these refugees were Sudanese and South Sudanese. Now, since the outbreak of the conflict, there have been movements throughout the country. And what we see is significant displacement both internally as well as externally. Now, we have in Sudan 24.7 million people in need of humanitarian aid and assistance. And that represents about half of the total population of Sudan. And I should also say that half of this number, about 13 million, are children. Now, they are lacking in terms of assistance, food. In some parts of this country, services have been discontinued. Water is unavailable. Electricity has been shut off. And many of them are in need of food. They're in need of nutritional supplies. They're in need of water and sanitation. And they're also in need of protection.
We have already seen over 560,000 people crossing into neighboring countries and 2 million people internally displaced. The UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, which a place you know very, very well, now expects its various estimates of 1 million refugees will be surpassed. Some estimates say by October of this year. Can the region and the neighboring country support the influx of so many refugees?
Well, I think the important thing that we feel is required is, of course, that borders should remain open for those seeking safety. I think that is of course, the most important aspect of those who are displaced at this point in time. I do believe we've seen at least neighboring countries demonstrate their traditional hospitality, and they have allowed these people to seek safety, where they will be assisted by UNHCR, as well as other humanitarian partners. So firstly and foremostly, it's asylum. Secondly, it's of course, these agencies need sufficient resources to be able to scale up their capacity and to make sure that they can provide what I would call in the initial stages, life-saving assistance. I think it's important that we focus on what is, as I said, a dire situation and a situation which very soon can become catastrophic. We continue to appeal to the parties to ensure that we can bring in the relevant capacities and expertise that we need, that when we are able to bring in supplies, relief items, that they are able to move freely throughout the territory so that we can access people who are in an extremely difficult situation and for whom urgent relief items are essential. We have also expressed our concern about the loss of humanitarian supplies through looting, and also sometimes the attacks on humanitarian workers. So we will continue to appeal to all parties to the conflict to facilitate the free, safe movement of humanitarian assistance and humanitarian actors so that we can try to ensure the safety as well as the well-being of the Sudanese. I should also say that we are moving through a very critical time. We have a small window of opportunity because very soon we will be moving into the rainy season. The roads will become impassable. We are struggling to get seeds and tools to the farmers so that they can plant even within this very difficult situation, so that we don't lose a planting season, and so that we can ensure that the country doesn't spiral into a situation of high food insecurity. So I think the appeal has been made, and we continue to appeal that we are here, the UN is here, the humanitarian partners are here, and all we need is for the environment for us to move our supplies and assurances of safety, even in those areas where conflict may still be on.
I would like to move to the ceasefire and your latest statements. After welcoming the latest ceasefire, UNITAMS accused the RSF and also the SAF of violations of the unilateral ceasefires declared by the two parties unilaterally. But more importantly, on Wednesday, and after welcoming the unilateral ceasefire, UNITAMS accused the RSF and its allied militias and the SAF as well of harming civilians. You accused the RSF through the statement of UNITAMS of being accountable for not only for violence against civilians, but also for rape, for looting in the areas they control, including Khartoum, and that RSF also ethnically targeted violence against civilians in Darfur. These are very serious charges that UNITAMS labeled against the RSF that tantamount to war crimes, some might argue, and also crimes against humanity, and maybe even genocide. Don't you think these are crimes that warrant international accountability and justice by the ICC, maybe, since some argue, and there are many, that the principle of complementarity might not apply to the Sudanese judicial system at the time being?
Let me just say, I think that there have been constant and repeated appeals to both parties to respect. I say both parties and those who are acting under their command to respect human rights as well as international human rights law. And we will continue to insist that the protection of civilians is upheld, and that those who indeed are targeting civilians or those who are perpetrating rape, these reports will be investigated, and of course there are relevant bodies who will make sure that there is accountability.
I'd like to move to the mandate of UNITAMS and its leadership. On May 26, General Burhan requested from the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres to replace Mr. Volker Perthes, who is the SRSG and the head of UNITAMS. And actually the Secretary General was shocked by that request and declaring Mr. Perthes as a persona non grata, and he said that does not apply to the United Nations officials. And Volker Perthes remain in his position as SRSG and the head of UNITAMS, working from Nairobi. How can he help, Mr. Perthes, bring the two warring parties together. When one party does not want to deal with him, refuse to recognize his authority or mandate, and this party happens to be the recognized sovereign state government.
I think the Secretary General was very clear in his statement regarding the applicability of the concept of persona non grata to UN officials. I think the Secretary General has made clear his position, his confidence in the Special Representative of the Secretary General, and I think that is all that I'm able to say on that particular situation.
I'm not speaking about personalities, I'm speaking about the mandate of UNITAMS, which is there to help in the transitional period and ensure that the country move into elections. That's the end and the establishment of a civilian government. But when one party refuses to deal with the person entrusted with leading this process, what hope do we have of succeeding if one party of the antagonists refuse to talk or cooperate with that personality? I'm just speaking logically here and trying to find the best way for the Sudanese people to come out from this situation.
I think I understand and I hear your question, but I think that the mandate of UNITAMS is a Security Council mandate. And as you know, the mandate is still running, and it will be for the Security Council, if it sees fit, to decide how to proceed in relation to UNITAM's mandate. In relation to the post of the SRSG, I think I've spoken already in terms of how that was dealt with by the Secretary General, and I have nothing further to contribute in relation to this.
The Sudanese ambassador here in New York, Ambassador Al-Harith Idris Al-Harith Muhammad, earlier this month spoke at the Security Council, and he said he hoped that you would work on communications with donors and go beyond the provision of humanitarian support, and hoped that you would work on peace building, strengthening capacity for both for youth and also reconstruction once the conflict ends. Are you indeed working on these aspects as far as possible?
We are in as much as we focus on the humanitarian response. We are also aware that there are pockets of stability throughout the country. We know that many of the displaced who have left, particularly those areas in which there is high insecurity, have moved to these pockets of stability. We know that communities there are strained, and we're trying to explore with the donors, as well as our partners, how we can begin to support these communities to build their resilience, to enable them to support the additional load of either family members, how we could make sure that livelihoods are not completely lost. So in as much as we are focusing on the humanitarian side of things, we have a clear lens focused on resilience and recovery. And where we see and are able to seize opportunities to do that, then that is something that I am beginning in terms of my engagement with donors and with UN agencies on the ground. We are beginning to do that already.
Clementine Nkweta-Salami, Deputy Special Representative of the Secretary General in UNITAMS and resident humanitarian coordinator for Sudan, we thank you for honoring us with your first sit-down interview, and we thank you for your insight and for your great work, humanitarian great work for the people of Sudan. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.